and instructional supplies. So if you look at that column that's marked general fund increase and decrease, it looks like salaries are going up $981,470. They're not. It's because we use the federal stimulus money to offset that, and as you know, the federal stimulus money is going away. We don't have that anymore. I think it's even clearer when we take a look at the schools. Pond Cove, if you take all the salaries out of Pond Cove, it costs us about $130,000 to operate Pond Cove. It looks like Tom's budget is up $49,626. It's not. We used $52,000 last year to offset instructional supplies. If you look at the last column, Tom's budget is actually down $3,208 from last year. The same is true at the middle school. If you take the salaries out of the middle school, it costs us $172,000 approximately to operate the middle school. It looks like Steve's budget is up $42,000, $41,934. It's not. It's actually down $3,000 because we used that federal stimulus money. And the same at the high school. High school, $362,724 without salaries. They're at the same amount of funding as they had last year. So the office of the superintendent without salaries, $82,685. We're recommending the same amount for next year. Custodial and facilities K through 12, it looks like Greg's budget is up, but he's in at about 0% also, but he has 3 areas which he'll review with you that we just can't bring in at 0%. I mean, the cost of fuel is in that portion of the budget, and that accounts for $66,000 of that $108,000 increase, and you know what's going on with the price of fuel. In fact, you might want to adjust what we have in there. We're projecting $3 a gallon, and right now that looks like a pretty conservative estimate, so you might want to actually increase that before we bring it to the town council. But we'll know more about how close $3 is to reality as we progress through the next 3 or 4 budget workshops. The other thing that's in that amount is our insurance is going up some $7,000, and we've got the new high school boiler. That accounts for about $34,000. And I should acknowledge the portion that the town council has funded. They stepped up a week or 2 ago and gave us $200,000 towards the cost of the replacement of that boiler. If we didn't have that money, that line would be much higher. But that was, I really appreciate Mike and the town council providing that funding for us. So it keeps Greg's budget down quite a bit. Almost every other account he has is at the same amount as last year. Staff and student support, this is the money we budget for the professional improvement of teachers, administrators, and our support staff, and we're recommending the same amount of funding as last year. We also budget for our student support teams in those accounts. Volunteer services, it's a whopping $690 that we provide in funding for that. I mean, you want to talk about return on investment, I think that's one of the accounts that we get a tremendous return on investment. We have over 900 volunteers that Gail organizes, and they provide over 22,000 hours of service. So that's a tremendous assistance to the school system. Health services, the account that Mary was asking about, the nurses, besides their salaries, use about $10,000 to run their programs, and we're recommending the same amount for next year. Transportation is pretty level also, but again, we have 2 things in the transportation budget that really are causing that to increase $21,471. The diesel fuel is about $15,000 of that. And each year, we buy a new bus, and we retire a bus. It's a great way of keeping the fleet modern. And if you get behind in the replacement of a bus, that means you've got to replace 3 or 4 at one time, and that's not a good way to manage that. So the new bus is going to cost us about $5,000 or $6,000 extra, so that's why that account is up $21,000. Instructional support, if you take all the salaries out of that, spending $237,100, that account is up $96,200. Part of that is for contracted services that we received in different federal stimulus money. It's not new money, but we used the special federal stimulus money to fund contracted services. And the other part of that increase, it's about $40-something thousand, is for an out-of-district tuition that we did not anticipate. We're actually funding that this year, so we'll need to continue funding it next year. Athletics is up about $18,000. Most of that is to increase the hours for the trainer. We're over budget almost every year on that line item, so we're trying to get closer to what we're actually spending. I think we budget around 15 and we're spending more like 25. Jeff's got the exact numbers for you. And the other part of that increase, we've got to get back on our uniform replacement schedule. If we fall too far behind in that, you're going to be faced with a major expenditures to replace uniforms. And Jeff has a 5-year uniform replacement schedule that needs a boost to get back on track. So that's why that's up. Good news about debt service, it's down $34,000. Technology, Gary's area, is a little bit less than last year, $2,000 less. Contingency is a big decrease. Last year, as we got near the end of the budget season, the state gave us $300,000 extra, more than what we were anticipating, and the school board put that into contingency. This year, we're reverting back to our historic contingency account, which is $70,000. I think when times get better, and they will eventually, you really need to increase that line item. That represents less than 0.5%. And for a $21 million budget, to have a $70,000 contingency, really isn't enough. For example, we've got a water heater at the middle school that we didn't anticipate having to spend money on, but that's going to be almost $70,000. And so that would eat up a whole contingency fund. And you just can't be that precise. We're what, 15 months away from when we're going to be spending this money, so 0.5% in contingency is really skinny. But, this is not the economic climate to try to do a whole lot when you're trying to bring in a skinny budget. So the total, if you look at that last column, we're up $447,719, the one on the far right. And it shows, we're up 1.3. It's because this federal stimulus money was nice, but it's gone and it's not coming back. So let's just take a look at the budget summary quickly, and we'll turn it over to the principals and others. Total expenditure budget, as I reviewed, is up 2.2%. Revenues, there's some good news in revenues. We learned last week that, if the governor's budget prevails, Cape Elizabeth is going to receive $344,000 more than what we did last year. So that's real good news. And that number might change, because the legislature hasn't voted on a budget yet. But right now, that's the number they've provided, and that certainly is good news. Bad news? We're losing the federal stimulus money. That's the $925,000 that's going away. But some more good news. Last year we received $452,524, and the school board knew they had that $925,000 disappearing, so we haven't spent that money. So that can be used to offset, the loss of the federal stimulus money. So combined, the extra money from the state and the money that the school board last year knew that they would, that we would have to use for this year, it helps offset that $925,000. We have some other revenues. We have an undesignated fund balance. At the end of the year, whatever we have left over goes into that undesignated fund balance. And during good times, that balance grows, and during times like this, it gets pretty low, but we still think we'll have $250,000 that we can use, which is the amount historically that we've used. We have some other revenue. We have a pay-to-play athletic policy, and that brings in, I think, about $45,000 each year. And we have parking fees at the high school, which brings in an additional $8,000, so that's $53,000. State agency clients, these are students for one reason or another that the state has custody, and if they live in Cape Elizabeth and require special education services, the state will reimburse us for those. Those monies are down a little bit because one of our students is graduating. Medicaid, Don does a great job of chasing that money. There are certain services that special ed students require that are reimbursed by the state and federal government. Medicaid, that money is going away, but we're sitting on about $400,000 of Medicaid money right now. We're not recommending that you use that money this year because next year, that $452,000 that you see up there that the school board didn't spend, that goes away. So we've really got a 2-year problem that we're trying to manage with this federal stimulus money. So our suggestion would be not to use the Medicaid money this year, but to use it next year to offset that $452,000 that you see up there. See, that disappears next year. That's going to be the problem. This year, it's the $925 that's the problem, but next year, it's the $452 that's going to be the problem. So if you use the Medicaid money next year, you won't, property taxpayers are not going to be faced with a huge property increase either. And we'll go over a 3-year plan with you at a subsequent workshop, but I just wanted to let you know our thinking. You may disagree and say, let's use the Medicaid money and use it all this year, and you could really be heroes this year, but I don't know what you do next year. So the revenues total, we're down about 8% in revenue. It's nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. That extra state funding really helps tremendously. And the fact that the school board had that foresight not to get liberal with the $452,000, but rather preserve it was real smart also. So again, just to repeat, the median price home, and I know some people would probably quarrel that's the median price home in Cape Elizabeth, but that's what the assessor tells us is the median price home, so we'll run with that number. $253,800. That person is paying $4,532.87 in property taxes, and this budget means they would be paying $85.19 more, or about 1.9%. So that's the school funding history. And trying to develop a budget based on that number would be just plain silly, because there's no consistency to that number. That's our history. I mean, some years it's been good, and other years it's been bad. What would be wonderful, but it's probably not going to happen for a few years, is to get back on what a consistent amount you could expect from the state. But you can see the swing there is as much as over $1 million. And I know a lot of school systems do try to develop their budgets around state funding, but it doesn't make much sense to do that because you've got these tremendous highs and these tremendous lows. To me, it makes much more sense to be a little bit more even about how you're going about developing budgets. Plus, you've got no control over Augusta. You do